Welcome to the fifth edition of the Techies webinar. It's a momentous occasion for us as we turned one recently, and I would like to take a moment to thank our readers, our viewers, my colleague Sujit John, who's driving Techies, and to the rest of the team for making it one of the widely read tech properties by the technologists and for the technologists. We started Techies to celebrate the rise of technologists and how a new generation of talented developers are creating solutions that's cutting edge. We meet the managements of several companies often, but we thought it was time to put the spotlight on developers, and that's how Techies has evolved in the last 1 year. Today we have Prashanth Chandrasekar. He is the CEO of Stack Overflow. Welcome, Prashanth. Stack Overflow is a vibrant online developer community with more than 50 million visitors each month. Stack Overflow allows developers to ask questions and answer them. For employers, it provides tools to brand their candidates from its database of developers who are open to being contacted. Incidentally, Bangalore has the highest number of Stack Overflow users in the world, followed by London and Chennai. Prashanth grew up in Bangalore. He studied at the Frank Anthony Public School and Bishop Cotton Boys School. He did his bachelor's in computer engineering from the University of Maine, a master's in engineering management from Cornell University, and an MBA from Harvard Business School. Prior to Stack Overflow, he was with Rackspace, where he held a range of senior leadership roles, including as Senior Vice President and General Manager of Rackspace's global business focused on the world's leading public clouds, including AWS, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud, and Alibaba Cloud. Before Rackspace, Prashanth also worked at the Barclays Investment Bank and Capgemini Consulting. Today, he's going to talk about democratizing software development on Stack Overflow. Over to you, Prashanth, and welcome to the webinar.
Thank you, Shilpa. Thanks for having me. Let me just put up this content, and really great pleasure to talk to everybody here. It's really a pleasure to just engage with the Times Group. A lot of respect for what you all do, and this particular format focused on technology is very, very relevant to our mission. So I'll kick off with some content here and then open to questions. Great to engage with all the folks on Facebook today. All right, hopefully you can see this on your end.
Yeah. Okay,
great. So as Shilpa said, thank you for that introduction. And we very much, as this kind of the theme of this webinar goes, our mission is very connected to the theme of what Times of India is trying to do here with helping write the script of the future by serving developers and technologists. That is our mission statement. It guides everything that we do in the company, in our community. So it's a very significant platform. Obviously, it's the most trusted place for developers and technologists to find their answers to their most important questions and most difficult questions. And we're obviously the world's top 40 website because, again, we have something like 120 million people that show up on our websites every month, unique visitors. So it's a true privilege to be part of this company and this community. I joined about 9 months ago, and it's just been absolutely phenomenal to see the impact that we make, and also to just keep moving our mission forward, and also creating sort of the ecosystem of products on top of the foundation that we've built over many years. So with that, so let me just talk about, for folks that don't know what Stack Overflow is all about, just to give you a quick overview. So when we think about Stack Overflow, really we have historically served developers, and more we serve just a very broad swath of technologists. So whether that's cloud technology folks, or cybersecurity folks, or IT folks, or DevOps engineers, all of them leverage Stack Overflow, and they love it because it's a free and open forum. The foundation, which is the community product, it's a community built library of all sorts of information of coding knowledge, whether that's true code snippets, whether that's answers to common questions, whether it's on Python or Rust or JavaScript, you name it. And it's for a range of developers and technology, whether you're a beginner or you're an expert or you're a professional, it doesn't matter. And everybody uses Stack Overflow to answer their questions. And the format, as you can see, is what you see on the right. And that's the historical way in which we've delivered knowledge in our community, and we are constantly delivering new exciting features in our community platform based on feedback from the community. So very exciting developments to come over the next 6 months. So, and then overall, in terms of our stats, just to give you a sense of the reach that we have, we've just had a massive impact over the past decade, right? So we have something like 120 million visitors across all our websites. So not only do we have Stack Overflow, but we have Stack Exchange, which is a broader group of websites beyond the Stack Overflow website. And that includes, websites on DevOps, includes websites on software engineering, it includes websites on cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, machine learning, you name it. We have something like 200,000 Amazon Web Services, questions and answers and code snippets. We have 300,000 Microsoft Azure questions and answers. So, just the scale is very, very significant to help people around the world. And Stack Overflow, again, that's the name, the one website that has obviously, we received a lot of attention for that. And that's about 50 million out of the 120 million. And we just have a significant number of signups even after 10 years of doing this. We have close to 100. On average, last year was about 150,000 signups. This year, actually, it has gone up meaningfully from that number, closer, higher than 200,000 per month. So we've really seen an acceleration of people around the world signing up for Stack Overflow and really being able to use it to use the content and knowledge to be able to build their own their applications that they're focused on. We have something like 9 million registered users. We have 5 billion sessions. We had 5 billion sessions in 2019. And we just have a tremendous amount of network effects in the community, right? So we have every 15 seconds, a question is asked across our website. So this gives you a sense of how rapidly, questions are asked. And by the way, answers are provided every 45 minutes across the community. Somewhere in the world, somebody answers a question that pops up every 15 seconds. So just a tremendous community. And obviously the DNA of Technologists is to share information, and the open source movement, which is so important for software development. All that drives, this very much the DNA of the community. And then ultimately, we have something like 19-20 million questions just on Stack Overflow. And if you look at our entire ecosystem of websites, we have something like 40 million questions and answers. So just, the numbers are very, very large. And then ultimately, of course, like I mentioned, we are a top 40 website in the world because of all the number of users coming to our websites. Okay, and then the foundation, like I've already talked about, is really the community, right? So with that mission statement that I mentioned, we have 85% of the world's developers and technologists visit our websites on a weekly basis. And, they come on and we talk about the question frequency, the answer frequency, and then the number of signups have been more recently, it has spiked to about 260. And if you look at the 120 million people that show up, out of which we believe about 70 million of those are true technologists. So, the theme of this webinar is all about technologists. So developers make up a big part of that. Technologists like DevOps folks and IT folks and cybersecurity folks make up another 20 million. So relative to other communities like GitHub, we're even larger than GitHub in many ways. And so that's it's been a phenomenal privilege to serve so many people around the world. And then if you think about the ecosystem of websites that I mentioned, beyond Stack Overflow, which is the 50 million, like I mentioned, the technical sites range from a whole range of topics that are described up here, from artificial intelligence to network engineering to quantum computing, et cetera. And then we also have a range of non-technical websites, an additional 100 that were all, by the way, all of this has been created by the community. It wasn't necessarily created by Stack Overflow, the company. And so that's why we love the community so much, because we're building this community with the community. It's never, one or the other. It's always in concert. All right, then I want to share some Indian technology trends. And, as Shilpa mentioned, Bangalore, out of all the cities in the world, has the highest number of visitors on our websites, by far, right? So as you can see, close to 42 million people visit our websites every month. And so that is super exciting. And it's compared to, kind of all the other cities that we see very significant network effects from. And we also, I'll show you here in a second, it's been interesting to see the trends more recently as people have gone, remote and have been a lot more perhaps focused on living in places that they were originally came from, or they moved out to cities, et cetera. It's been interesting to see some of those trends in our data. And also India's growth overall, just to kind of give you an overall sense, is that obviously the US, we are expecting the software developer market to grow over 21% over the next 8 years or so. And a lot of that, by the way, is created by Stack Overflow, because we create, in many ways, developers through the knowledge that we have in our community. People go learn from that, they train themselves, they practice, and they become better developers and technologists. And over time, that obviously increases professional developers in the market, and they're able to get jobs and so on, which our products enable. And so the US growth is very robust. It's about 20%. And the India growth, for what's fascinating is that based on the projections that have been laid out, the India developer population in particular is expected to overtake the US developer population by 2024. So just gives you a sense of the tremendous growth in the young folks in India that are all learning how to become engineers and become software developers as they graduate. So it's great to see. In addition, I wanted to share a little bit of the, some very interesting trends around the fastest growing cities in India. So, what's been interesting to see is not only, of course, do we have cities like Bangalore that have, very significant amounts of traffic, and large cities like Mumbai that you see here that continue to grow despite the very large traffic that they generate. But we're also seeing growth in smaller towns like Lucknow and Mysore and Nagpur and Thrissur and places that I visited when I was a child in India with my parents. But you would not necessarily expect all this growth to come from places, and you're seeing places like Dehradun has a 44% increase in users, or Ludhiana has a 65% increase in the number of users. So just it's fascinating to see that the tech ecosystem in India is thriving not only in the big cities but also in the you could call them tier 2 or other cities that are in India that continue to obviously make a big difference for the global economy by contributing. So, in addition, we do a developer survey that goes out to somewhere between every year. It ranges between about 65 to 90,000 folks that we poll. And obviously a big part of that, we obviously send it to a lot of developers in India as well. And so we pulled some Indian trends out of that developer report, and I want to share them with you here. And so firstly, when you think about age, it's fascinating to see that India has, on average, younger developers than the US or the world at large. And it's, which makes a lot of sense because you have people entering, software developer jobs right after college or a few years after university. And so it's really, it stands out relative to other parts of the world, including the US. Gender inclusivity, which is a big theme and important subject for us as we keep tracking, the diversity of our users. And what we do notice is that across the board, it's not particular to India or the US, et cetera, women are represented at higher levels amongst students versus professional developers. And that's on our platform, obviously. And so that's just been very interesting to see that obviously there's some work to do to make sure that we continue to be, welcoming and more, inclusive from a gender perspective. But it's good to see that we're beginning to see kind of an increase in the student population with a lot more diversity coming from that population. So that's so it's good to see, and I thought I'd share that. And then also when we think about professionals, developers in India are very interesting trends around blockchain. They are more likely to use, say that their organizations are using blockchain technology than other countries, which is fascinating compared, if we think about where India is on the sort of the Gartner S-curve on this topic. And then finally, newer languages, when we think about, what languages pay the most, as an example, in India, we see, relative to the US, we see Scala as the top, generating kind of language. And then we also see for India, Clojure and Rust as being the top earning languages. And then finally, just to kind of round out with Indian trends around the tags, which we obviously have a lot of information on, the types of languages that people use and what does that tell us about what the local economy is really working on. Firstly, I want to say that, definitely based on the amount of work that's happening in Swift and Android Studio and TensorFlow and Flutter and Blazor, there's definitely sort of a focus on mobile and it's fairly obvious because obviously India is a huge mobile market and mobile first in many ways. So that clearly comes through in what we see Indian developers building. In addition, we see in terms of the tags that we notice for the world versus India, the world is fairly consistent, with Python and JavaScript and Java being sort of the highest number of sessions that we see. But in India, we see, it's similar with JavaScript. There's a flip in the order with JavaScript, Java, and Python. And then we also see more broadly, more back-end applications being developed in India than we do front-end applications, which are happening sort of more in the Western world, so to speak. So it's an interesting difference. And I would say over time, we expect that to change, obviously, with India leading in many ways innovation versus being, sort of the factory of software development, and really this tremendous amount of talent that's producing applications for American-based companies or other Western-based companies. But there's a lot of obviously innovation now accelerating in India, which we believe these trends will also look different over the next year or two. So our survey gives us some tremendous insight around the progression on this topic. And then finally, in terms of the years of coding experience, I think one thing to perhaps leave here is that there is some work to do in India's case. According to our data, Indian coders start writing code a little later relative to other countries, even like Poland, Germany, and others who start at much earlier ages, at about 15 or around that time. The Indian developers seem to start slightly later, perhaps right after high school on average. When you look at it, obviously people have computer science in high school curriculums, but a lot of it seems to sort of crescendo post the secondary education. So that's something to think about and something for folks to focus on. And obviously the number of years of coding experience, as you can see on the right side, India's about eight years relative to, if you look at places like Australia, double that number. So there's still definitely work to do as it relates to bringing folks along much earlier and increasing the amount of experience that they have as they go into the workforce. All right, and then to kind of move on from the Indian trends, just to give you a sense of where we are. We're also all in a very fascinating time with remote work and everybody focused on working from home and and really staying safe as part of the COVID-19 epidemic. The world is obviously going remote, and Stack Overflow very much is at the heart of that, right? It would be a single source of truth for the public, knowledge on all things technical or technology and developer focused. And then we also obviously build internal communities through our Teams product. And so we enable this remote work very, very rapidly overall as part of what we do in our mission statement and our products. And so very briefly, I want to mention, our products. We have an ecosystem of products. Obviously, we've talked a lot about the top two with our community and the broad reach that we have there. And then we have, two items around the when we think about precise relevance. What we're trying to do there is making sure that big tech companies, and this has been sort of the company's products for a few years, with our advertising business and our talent business, helping companies promote themselves like a big, you name a tech company, is able to showcase not only their company, but also, hire developers or technologists off our website. So if you're a developer listening to this, if you're looking for your next job, we have a tremendous job board, and our Indian job listings are, significant, right? So we're able to serve you there. And then also, in terms of when developers and technologists join companies, they're able to then use our Teams product, which is the bottom right that you see there, to help share and really kind of collaborate with their peers across all parts of the organization, whether that's product and engineering or developers and dev and ops, or breaking down silos between product and go-to-market teams. Using our asynchronous collaboration tool, Stack Overflow for Teams, allows you to do that very, very effectively, especially in this age of remote collaboration. And just if you think about the kind of the various tools that people use to build software, obviously the cloud world, the world that I come from prior to Stack Overflow with that AWS and Microsoft Azure, you've got code hosting platforms like GitHub or GitLab, and you have developer CI/CD tools or log aggregation tools like Splunk and Circle CI and Jenkins, and you have project management tools like Asana and Trello and Jira. And then you have real-time chat ops tools that I'm sure many of you, including this call here, we're using Zoom, but we all use Slack in big organizations, or Microsoft Teams, Google Hangouts. But one of the categories that is not necessarily I would say well represented outside of Stack Overflow is knowledge sharing. And so really, when we think about the incumbents, wikis, which are mostly what people use, internally. But I would say the technologist community really, they crave and really love the format and the very consumable nature of Stack Overflow's format in the public community. So when we think about knowledge sharing within companies, Stack Overflow is very much leading in this space with our Stack Overflow for Teams capability as the leading knowledge sharing platform. And that's why we are an indispensable part of the tech community's workflow, and why so many people come to our websites repeatedly on a weekly and daily basis. And we've integrated, by the way, with all the tools that I mentioned, many of the tools that I mentioned in the previous image, including Slack, including Microsoft Teams, including GitHub Enterprise and Jira and Okta. So we are very much part of, from an asynchronous perspective, a huge part of that. And so if you think about the comparison, the synchronous versus the asynchronous world, you've got obviously value over time as accruing on Stack Overflow for Teams, because you're able to really showcase the most important questions, the most important answers, always accurate and fresh within organizations. It's structured in the familiar Stack Overflow format that technologists love. It's highly discoverable across both public and private. It's highly proactive in anticipating what all your new hires, as an example, are going to ask you. So you're prepared and you've got that repository of questions and answers internally, and along with other form factors. You're very objective in this information, and obviously it's loved by technologists. And of course, it's not as real time as Slack or Zoom, but it works very seamlessly from an asynchronous standpoint. And we've been finally, just to round it out, we've been named a leader in this space for 5 quarters in a row for Stack Overflow for Teams in our knowledge sharing category. So I encourage anybody that's interested in learning more about it to go to our websites and check it out. We have a free trial, and we'd love to work with you and extend your public community experience into your private companies. All right, so with that, I'm happy to take questions, Shilpa, and hopefully that's been helpful.
Thank you so much, Prashanth. That was very insightful on the developer ecosystem in India.
Absolutely.
Prashanth, the Indian software development landscape is traditionally concentrated around some of the metros. Now, do you see tier 2 towns and cities becoming your new growth engine? If you can talk about the engagement and experience of these developers on your platform.
Yeah, so I mean, absolutely right. As you saw the data that I put up with smaller towns or maybe less familiar cities that are seeing significant growth. I mean, there could be a few reasons for that, and we're doing some data analysis around this through our data science team over the next couple of months, trying to understand if the current move, especially we're just about 1 quarter into the whole work from home because of COVID-19 situation. And even prior to that, we've seen this high growth in smaller towns. But I suspect what will happen, and we have a hypothesis that we will validate here, is that a lot of deurbanization, people moving back to smaller towns, moving away from cities. You can certainly see that in the US with cities like New York City, where there's a lot more now real estate purchases happening in the suburbs, or away from the city, as an example. So similarly in India, as we've seen so much displacement as a result of this crisis, one of our hypotheses is that our developers going back to places that they came from originally, and is that where they're going to operate at least for a period of time, and is that more of a temporary phenomenon? Those are things that we're obviously all debating, whether that's going to be a hybrid for the future, work from home, etc. I suspect some of that will linger very much in the future, and will become very much a part of how we do work. And I think work will be a lot more distributed than it is today, as it is very concentrated in certain cities.
Prashanth, equally, I enjoyed it very much. Wonderful to hear about all these stats about Indian developers. I mean, that's the reason why we started this page. It's so fascinating. Before I ask my question, I just wanted to tell all our viewers, please, the Chat box is open. Ask your questions. We will ask those questions to Prashanth. Prashanth, my question is, you have those who ask questions and those who answer questions. In India, what do you find more? Are there more people who ask questions, or are there equally people who answer questions? And the younger Indian audiences, can you make out whether they are mostly asking questions?
Yeah, that's an very interesting question from the audience. I think that we see it fairly consistently that, if you just look at the number of, the number of visitors that come to our websites and the number of users that sign up for accounts, we've seen a very steady increase in the number of user account creation. Typically, when you create accounts on Stack Overflow, what that means is that you're going to contribute in some way. You're either asking a question or you're answering a question that exists out there. So we have seen, broadly speaking, a significant uptick. I mentioned that earlier in one of the stats. Last year was about 150,000 signups from around the world per month. This year, on average, it's now moved above 200,000 per month, at least the past few months. So that could be accelerated based on people, spending a lot more time online, et cetera. It could also be because of, us responding to very specific requests from the community. For example, things like dark mode that we launched, which people just absolutely loved in March or so. And so people have been, by signing up for accounts, that's again a global phenomenon. The vast majority of people, obviously, they are able to very quickly get the knowledge and they're able to move on. So engagement is a very sort of important statistic for us. It's a very important metric, and that's a kind of a global phenomenon. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's very different, Sujit, in India versus the US or any other part of the world. It's sort of fairly consistent across the.
Okay. Shilpa?
Prashanth, how do you think some of the top contributors really benefit from getting the visibility on Stack Overflow? If you can share some of your personal experiences there as well in interacting with the developers.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this goes to also Sujit's question to a big degree, which is to a large degree, which is, if you notice, people just are absolutely proud of the contributions in the community, including a lot of Indian developers that promoted on Twitter, and I do. It comes across my feed every so often, and they're congratulating them, whether it hit certain milestones or received 100,000 points or whatnot. And I think all of those things gives folks internally, first of all, what's most important is they gives them internally a sense of confidence, which I think is huge, which is really like, it's amazing to see people say, wow, they have actually hit this personal milestone that they've been at. It's kind of like going to the gym, right? Everybody goes to the gym. You run 1 mile, you run 2 miles, you run 3 miles, and people mentally are very oriented towards getting really good at whatever software programming language. And it's been so great to say, hey, I've become a top 10% a contributor in Stack Overflow for Python, or top 1% contributor for Python. And people are very proud of it, very equivalently to hitting a certain personal milestone on a personal fitness level. And that is, not only important for their personal confidence, which is important, but also they get a lot of satisfaction from sharing, what they've learned with a lot of people. So we even have, the ability to showcase an individual user's contribution, how many people it reaches. So we can say, if you ask a question or answer a question, it has impacted 300,000 people since you actually did that, right?
Really?
Yeah, so we show that in the user profile. So that's a huge part of why people are motivated, because they want to really help people, and that's why we exist in many ways. And so those are the foundation, the internal kind of feeling. And then, of course, there are the externalities and the aspects of obviously being attractive to job employers, which people post on their profiles. We have developer profiles that they've created, which are effectively like LinkedIn profiles for developers. Or even if they have LinkedIn profiles, they list their Stack Overflow account there with their badges and their scores, and they're able to effectively showcase, a couple things. One is their expertise on a specific language or a certain set of technologies, and everything's out there for people to see, right? Just like code is in GitHub repos, here all your questions and answers are out there for people to see and say, oh wow, this person has answered some very complex or interesting questions. As an employer, that's very interesting to see. And then secondly, also the way in which you answer and how collaborative you are with your fellow community member, the way in which, because it's, you're able to see, is this person a great team-based environment worker? Is this somebody who's going to be collaborative? There's a lot that you can glean from Stack Overflow, what the activity on these accounts. And so people leverage them absolutely to find jobs, share information, and of course, take that back into their companies through our Teams product, which we have.
Okay. Very interesting. There's this question from one of the viewers, Vishal Gupta. How do you think knowledge management platforms will evolve in the near future?
Yeah, so very much, I think that, Vishal, thanks for that question. I think very much the bifurcation that I mentioned around synchronous and asynchronous. Synchronous as in real time, and asynchronous as in true knowledge sharing, which is persistent, evergreen knowledge that's not going to disappear after asking a very transactional question. So there's definitely that bifurcation. Most of the world today is all focused on transactional Slack and Teams and Zoom calls, and and the number of times I've been hit on while we're speaking, my phone has been lighting up with all sorts of Slack messages, and we're big Slack lovers, and we love, the platform. But that's, it's useful for a very, very specific set of use cases. But then when you really want to do work, I think when you want to do and collaborate in a remote workplace, and really be able to have a common place for you to, for example, share with all the salespeople in your company what the latest feature is, rather than being asked by 100 salespeople about the same question again and again with your engineer that's trying to effectively focus on building code. Why don't we have it documented in an evergreen fashion? Even if you launched, a version 1.3 versus version 1.2, which was yesterday, that shows up in this question, and people go straight to that question and basically get the answer to their question as they talk to customers. Or if they're trying to figure out, as you onboard a lot of people, as kind of large tech companies are bringing on new people, how do we make sure the 100 people are not asking the same questions that last week's class asked? Today there's no great solution other than hoping that you create a bunch of onboarding meetings, but our solution with our Teams product in the asynchronous category can again make that very effective for folks. So I think that bifurcation is really in our minds, and we believe we're extremely we're the leader in the asynchronous world, which is why we're very excited about where we are.
Okay. Shilpa?
Yeah, Prashanth, we have a question from one of our viewers, Sanjay Chauhan. He wants to know, what is the future going to be for QA professionals who form a large part of the Indian IT community?
Yeah, so I think QA is much like the continuum, like I mentioned. I kind of broadly categorized CI/CD tools or continuous integration, continuous deployment tools, and DevOps tools, log aggregation tools. I think QA and test and security, all of that falls in that broad. It's obviously a very, very important aspect of the kind of the end-to-end process of building applications. I think it's harder these days to just be focused on a very narrow silo. I think our thought process is that full stack engineers are going to need to know about cloud technologies. Everybody knows about Amazon Web Services or Microsoft Azure or Google Cloud these days, right? You have to know how to use it. Similarly, QA professionals, will have to kind of go beyond their comfort zone. When you think about DevSecOps, that's a good example where you got development, security, and operations, which is an evolution of the DevOps movement. And similarly, test, as you think about how you test your environments, the CI/CD tool sets that people use, or continuous integration, continuous deployment, you're testing very rapidly, you're deploying very rapidly, and that integrates with cloud technology tools, which integrates with obviously full stack engineering tools. So having sort of a broader purview on the tool set that I explained and the sort of the latest of what's available, and the world is moving extremely rapidly around this topic, is I think going to be important for QA professionals in India to learn and really expand their knowledge.
Prashanth, you mentioned Rust and Clojure being the highest paying jobs in India. What's the reason for that, you think?
I think it has to do with it's fascinating to see all the the development year over year of just wonderful new improvements on previous. When I was a developer, I started out I first was on Logo and Basic in India, and then it was C++, and then Perl, and then Java, and but if you fast forward to these days, I mean it's fascinating the level of efficiency and effectiveness of the new languages that are out there, and they're highly just in terms of the efficiency for software developers, it's highly effective, right? So in that context, languages like Rust, not a surprise that they're actually very popular around the world. It's the fastest growing language that we see. And so there's a significant global demand for that, which is why Indian developers who are who are basically paying attention to trends and are able to effectively leverage the most effective or the most efficient language on whatever topic, whether it's Rust or anything else, are going to have a leg up. And I think that's as a result of that, people are looking for the next edge to be able to go faster, to be able to do more with less. That's why you see also a very big rise in things like serverless technology is another area I would focus on with things like AWS Lambda or Microsoft Azure's equivalent. So all these kind of newer technologies that are highly efficient and effective, faster, and developers and technologists are all about speed and efficiency and less context. So that's really why you're seeing, as these languages evolve.
But are there specific use cases for Rust and Clojure which are particularly important?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, we actually do document a lot, and I mentioned this around the back end and the front end application point here. So if you look at, there's actually a fairly good description of this in our software, in our developer report for 2020. So I'd encourage people to go download that from our public websites. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Shilpa?
Prashanth, you spoke about how developers in Poland and Germany start as young as 15 years, and Indian developers, start a bit late. Any particular reason that your research showed as to why we've not had that kind of a head start yet?
Yeah, it's hard to, having been through the Indian education system, it is my only kind of one of my hypotheses around this topic is that we have the computer science education starts out at a fairly decent age. When I think we first were exposed to it. For me personally, it was because my parents taught me a computer fairly early when I was young. But I would say school, it starts around 8th to 10th grade, something in that range, right? So I think but I think it sort of depends on the education system. It's not necessarily standard in every part of it. Sort of depends if you're, in each one of the curriculum types. So that's one. I think informally picking up languages and learning how to code is really probably the big difference. I think the education system introduces it in a very formal way in a particular, part of the classes, in the specific grade in the education system. But I think in other countries, you're seeing people just pick up on their own much earlier, going and just, hacking things together. When they are, much younger, and they use obviously Stack Overflow in many ways to get started, and so that's really what I would say is probably likely the reason.
Yeah, I think things are changing, and we wrote a story in this page itself a few months ago, talking to these youngsters. Exactly what you said. I mean, they just pick it up from online. The kind of work some of them are doing is just unbelievable. I mean. So I think it's a matter of time before the age that Indians start in your records will also start falling.
Yes.
Because across school students now, especially in cities like Bangalore, I'm not so sure about others. I guess it will be similar in many other cities as well. They're all picking up coding at a very early age now.
Right.
Absolutely. Yes, we fully expect to see these stats change over the next year. And
I'm sure it will.
Yeah.
Do you have any specific suggestions for schools in this matter? How does it happen in the US and all that? Anything that they do?
Yeah, no, I would say that it's a lot more, I would say, encouraged early on. So for I have two young kids, right? I have a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old. And my 10-year-old, when she was 8 years old, in fact, she was exposed to something called code.org. So 8 years old, she's exposed to coding, which is like even earlier than when I was exposed to it. And that is, again, free public platform, phenomenal nonprofit, that we've always loved. And so that's an example of somebody in the, sort of kindergarten, pre-K, or even like sort of, obviously early primary school type, timeline, being able to be introduced to code. And then of course you can build from there. So I think having it earlier to just give folks the comfort of using computers, using available platforms to do very simple things. I think if anybody that's coded here, when you started with Logo, was a phenomenal experience. Just being able to control a cursor to draw something with a certain command. There's a sense of control that comes, which is just tremendous to channel creative energy, youngsters' creative energy, to that particular outcome. So that's what I would say. I think exposing folks to online platforms like that are very safe, and and a part of the curriculum very early, I think will be a huge boost.
Okay. In your platform, there'll be lots of answers on subjects like Java, Python, and all of that. If there's a new language emerging or a new technology emerging, there'll be fewer answers. I mean, is there something that you do to encourage people to, some ways have more questions answered around these newer areas?
Yeah, no, great question. I think for us, what I mentioned earlier around, we very much think about the community as we're building with the community. So, we obviously have a huge part along with the community in making sure that, the quality of the questions and the answers and the network effects, and we're making sure that people are, that we make it easier for people to contribute. We make it, easier for people to ask questions. When newer languages start emerging, there's absolutely ways for the community, together with our moderators that we have from our company, to be able to propose certain new communities to kind of show up. Or it could be even a brand new community outside of Stack Overflow, as an example, around our Stack Exchange websites, or it could be across our Stack Overflow websites. And then we have in addition, we have very specific tags that might develop out of the individual the languages that people are beginning to kind of look at. And so it's interesting that those are typically promoted by our moderators, but effectively we're trying to make sure that if new sites are created, they're proposed in what we call Area 51. Those get approved, and they effectively make its way into a formal community. So we do things like that to make sure that people are able to propose new things and are able to make their way through. And then separately, there's also the ability for folks to really kind of contribute to new tags within Stack Overflow.
Okay, interesting. Shilpa?
We have a question from Rohit Achar. So he wants to know, how does Stack Overflow actively engage with moderators on the platform? And how are moderators different from regular users? And also, how does one become a moderator on the platform?
Yeah, so there is there are a couple of different ways. We have something called a moderator council that's been created, and there's actually a ton of information on this that we recently posted in a blog post, and we continue to do this in our meta community as well as more broadly. And so some really good content around how do you effectively apply to be a new moderator. There's moderator elections. That's, again, they're nominated by folks in the community. These folks are able to effectively apply. And they're able to, be part of the ecosystem of making sure that the quality is high. They're able to, be there as a part of making sure community members feel welcome. And there's, generally, good collaboration across the board. So the councils, you're able to go and propose yourself as, you're able to be nominated as one, and then it goes through sort of a selection process, which ultimately is, again, selected by the community, and we have, if, there's certain topics that the company might get involved with, but really it's by the community in many ways. And so there's actually a well-documented blog post from a couple of weeks ago that I'd encourage you to go look at, and that details this process.
There's this question from Pratiksha Thakur. How is the future looking for web development like .NET / Java? I feel these have become legacy technologies.
Yeah, interesting. It's a great question. I would say .NET, we're one of the world's largest, by the way, .NET websites. Our Stack Overflow is built on .NET. So I don't think it's not going anywhere from that aspect. .NET Core, there's actually another big post we made around our migration to that recently. So there's, incumbents and kind of languages that have, like .NET and Java, who've been the historical languages, will continue to play a big part in kind of a foundational element, for many websites, for a long time. Like I don't think it's going to go away. But there will be newer and newer languages that show up for the use cases in the examples that I mentioned previously, Sujit, which I think will add to it. So there's always, I think I don't think it's ever a 0-1 type situation where things sort of like go to zero and then all of a sudden it's not a flash in the pan type concept. It takes years, in many cases decades for that to, but transformation is inevitable. New languages are inevitable, but the foundation of applications that have been built on a certain technology and being upgraded on the newest version of that technology will continue to exist. And there are good, robust reasons why that happened. why that happens. And so we expect them to change in terms of the use cases. We expect people to these ecosystems to the Java open source movement will morph based on the requirements of the users to focus on certain types of applications over time. So it'll look certainly different. I don't believe it'll go away anytime soon, in my opinion.
We had that recent story out from the US itself. No, they were looking for COBOL programmers because some of those old systems, mainframe systems, suddenly needed to be upgraded and all that.
That's right. I mean, COBOL's a good example. We actually had a podcast on the same topic because there's all this, all the need for COBOL programmers because of what we are going through with all the economic stimulus points from the COVID-19 situation. That was a big part of that. And also you look at mainframes, mainframes have been around for a very long time, but people are moving very obviously rapidly to the cloud. But we're talking about mainframes, which is decades old technology, right? But somebody is still running mainframes somewhere. Mm-hmm. And so there'll be a long tail effect. It'll go away over, decades, but I would say that it's not a kind of a quick change.
Okay. Shilpa, do you have a question?
Yeah, we have a question from one of our viewers. Does Stack Overflow use AI for moderation with a rapidly increasing size of the community?
Yes, absolutely. We actually have something called the unfriendly robot, which is our most recent iteration of using AI and ML to make sure that we do quote unquote moderation by going and flagging comments or conversations that are not necessarily along with our code of conduct, etc. So it flags to us versus humans. We have this robot that goes and screens, and we also wrote about this recently. Which is phenomenal, right? It was built by our data science and engineering teams, and they just did a great job of giving us great insight on the quality of the answers and what questions people are asking and whether they're off base or not in if there were certain comments that were not appropriate, then we would flag it to us. So we absolutely use AI and ML to make sure that we're efficient and we use the best technology for the heavy duty work.
You said women, there's a higher proportion of women among students. I guess that will translate over time into a higher proportion of women among professionals as well, right?
Indeed, yeah, absolutely. That should over time. That's why that's an encouraging stat, because if we're starting earlier, I think that would suggest that will all translate to usage in a more diverse way as folks come into the workforce, and obviously our products enable people to get jobs. They obviously enable people to learn early on, they enable people to get jobs, and then they enable people to go and collaborate internally with our team's product. So all those things, I think, will allow that those diversity stats to increase over time.
Okay. Shilpa, do you have anything?
Yeah, so how do you think recruiters are using Stack Overflow platform and trying to source the best of breed talent?
Yeah, so one of our three products, like I mentioned, we have a talent product, and our talent product for big companies. It doesn't matter, Times of India is an example. Could post about your company as why Times of India is a great employer for technologists, and you could also post in there your very specific technologist jobs that you're looking to fill. And of course, since we have the world's millions of developers that show up every month on our websites, millions of people have created developer profiles, effectively their personal resume types, along with their Stack Overflow reputations and their GitHub repositories and so on. All that translates to their ability to go and apply to those jobs for Times of India. So that's how we do it. And so we work with all the big tech companies, whether it's large enterprises or mid-market or SMBs, to create a two-sided marketplace where companies post about and advertise about themselves and promote themselves and post their job listings, and then developers and technologists are able to apply to those job listings.
Prashanth, we've exceeded the time that we requested from you. If you don't mind, can we carry on for a little more time?
I have a couple minutes, absolutely, yeah.
Okay. There's a question from Warren D'Souza. Has gamification increased user engagement and contribution on the platform?
Yeah, I mean, it is absolutely foundational, right? I mean, gamification is a little bit of it's an interesting word, but I mean, I would say absolutely, because of the way in which we allocate points and upvotes and downvotes and badges, and we have more things that we're going to be introducing over time, like that's what I was mentioning around the next 6 months. which are going to be very exciting things for the community to engage on. And absolutely, it's been a huge part of driving engagement. And this is the brilliance of the platform that our founders created, over a decade ago, right? And so when you think about when this company was founded in the community, which came again from the community in collaboration with the community, that the system and the algorithm and the gamification just works, and that's persisted over a decade. That's really the proof point of whether or not it's increased engagement, because over a decade of engagement through the gamification is really why we've resulted in the massive usage that we have today. So 100%, and I think there's going to be more of that here in the next in the future.
Okay. Shilpa?
Yeah. Do you see a demand for content to be in regional languages? On your website, are you exploring some of those options?
Indian regional languages. I mean, I think you have Russian, Spanish, and all that, right?
Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I think.
Right. Yeah.
But historically, yes, it has been very much. The company has picked its spots based on where they see a lot of demand for trafficking, non-English speaking countries, and to create local language versions of the community pages. In India, I think it's been interesting because obviously there's a very massive English speaking population, and so I think it's been less of a need to go translate kind of to local languages. So that's been, I would say, the historical kind of point of view. And, I think we're constantly looking at, obviously, our biggest user base is in India, even ahead of the US and cities like Bangalore. So, but we've really not seen that in the kind of the feedback, we've specifically from Indian users. I think other parts of the world, absolutely, we have requests for other languages. But in India in particular, I think we've seen mostly it's an English speaking population.
Prashanth, how do you see the quality of developers in India versus those in the Valley?
No, I mean, they're absolutely, it's phenomenal, right? I mean, I was just on about 10 days ago with the IIT Madras, students that invited me to present to them. And, it's just, it's amazing to see the talent that comes out of India. I mean, I have so many, classmates of mine and people that are massive. It's just phenomenally talented folks, in all the educational institutions that I've been at. And there's no question that some of the best developers in the world come from India, right? So and you don't have to look very far when you think about the ecosystem of developers that contribute to companies around the world. There's a huge swath from India. Now, there's something to be said around, the types of work that they're doing. What types of work are they building? So developers are very broad, or technology is a very broad topic. So when you think about, QA as one of the users, one of the attendees asked, or you talk about, you talk about back-end versus front-end applications. There are differences, certainly, right? What is India focused on versus what a Western, somebody in the US or in Europe. So there's work there around, how do you, I think you'll see this change when India becomes even more of an innovation hub versus more of a place like sort of the factory of software development, which, obviously has the historical relevance of India is that in the context of helping tech companies. But as tech companies in India begin to innovate, and there are more startups that come up within India to serve the local markets, you will see, I believe, a lot more of the front end work increase. You'll see the quality even go up even more because there'll be a lot more diversity in the types of applications they're building. And that's, I think, will just sort of be exponential. So I think there's no shortage of raw talent. There's definitely a difference, and there's no differences on that topic. There's definitely differences on what people are working on, what they're spending their time on, certainly.
But generally, is there more innovation happening on the front end than the back end, or is it similar?
There's more back end innovation happening in India relative to front end innovation.
No, but globally, in the US and all that?
Globally, in the US, there's more front end than there is back end.
Okay.
So it's exactly yeah.
What do you think accounts for that, this difference?
It's primarily what I mentioned, right? When we think about, okay, it's similar to, you could extend the earlier notion of, right, okay, what applications are operating truly in front of customers and what those are, and then what are the ones that are operating as sort of engines to enable those customer interactions to happen. So if you think about, if you extend this to, the outsourcing movement, for a couple of decades, it's the same concept. So how do you move from there to becoming more of the heart of the innovation, where you're building world's leading companies from India that basically then serve the world versus US companies serving the world, and then leveraging Indian technologists to be able to go and build out the next application. So that's effectively that change, I think, will happen over time as India becomes more and more prevalent as a kind of a global powerhouse.
Okay. Shilpa, anything more?
One last question, Prashanth, from our viewers, Mauli. So he wants to know, how do you ensure if there's enough content for the technologies in nascent stages like Rust and Clojure as platform is user-driven?
Yeah, so this is what I was referencing earlier as network effects, right? So because the great thing that we have is that we have this community of technologists that just love to share, right? So and the system that enables people to share is so rapid and so it just works. Like I mentioned, the algorithm and the gamification to the earlier question, is that it enables people to really have an incentive to contribute and to be rewarded for that contribution. And so if there's a new language like, or newer language like Clojure, et cetera, that comes up, people are incentivized to go and contribute. As a result of that, there are other users. And again, the volume is so large that the network effects of people that are in similar communities that then go and contribute to these communities, they translate pretty well. That then becomes through when people go and ask questions on Google and say, how do I do this in Clojure? It typically will land on Stack Overflow 9.5 times out of 10. And so as a result, there's this very significant network effect that is in place that allows that to kind of get reinforced and keeps building. And then more and more people contribute to those communities, and this effectively it mushrooms from there. So effectively, that we have this great benefit of being the world's most trusted community for software developers and technologists. And as a result of that, people know where to go to get answers to any technology. And so if it's a new technology, they know they can go there to ask the first question, because the world's community on any topic technology topic is there. So they're very likely to get an answer anyways. So that's why they do it.
So one last question from my side. In terms of categories of questions, is there something that dominates? Can you classify questions in some categories?
No, I think it's, I think maybe with Stack Overflow versus Stack Exchange, very different, right? So Stack Exchange, which are all our other websites, including technology or focused websites and non-technology focused websites. Stack Overflow, it runs the gamut. So there isn't, I would say, a specific question category necessarily, Sujit, but I would say it's, we like to say that the world's questions have been answered on Stack Overflow on any technology topic. So it literally runs the gamut. So, and we're very proud of that aspect in general.
Okay. Shilpa, will you?
Yeah, Prashanth, it's really a delight and a pleasure to host you on the Times Techies webinar. Thank you so much, for being really considerate. We've, overshot, but thank you so much for your time and those insightful, data points on the developer community. We thoroughly enjoyed the discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Prashanth. Amazing.
Thank you so much.
To you.
Yeah, thank you, Shilpa and Sujit.
How often do you come to India?
I come typically every year because my parents live in Bangalore. So, I have a very good reason to visit and of course, stay in touch with where I grew up. So it's, I'll obviously look you folks up when I'm there next. But in general, thank you so much. Pleasure speaking with both of you again, and Shilpa, good to see you again. And also, good luck to all your viewers and all the technologists in India as they deal with this, really obviously twilight zone like environment that we're in with COVID-19. So I hope everybody stays safe and healthy and very positive.
Thanks, Prashanth.
Stay safe, Prashanth. Thank you so much.
Yes. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yes. Bye. Bye.